Hi, I'm Ingrid Beach, widow of Ned Beach, author of Run Silent, Run Deep, and I'm happy today to be introducing the Naval Historical Foundation's second Saturday program, which I'm pleased to note is going to concentrate on my husband's book, Run Silent, Run Deep. But I particularly want to introduce the Naval Historical Foundation's Admiral Sonny Masso.
Thank you, Mrs. Beach, for your warm introduction. I'm Sonny Masso, Executive Director of the Naval Historical Foundation, and I'm proudly standing in the Washington Navy Yard in historic Washington, D.C., on the deck and sail area of the USS Vallejo. The USS Vallejo was the lead boat of the largest class of submarines ever produced by the United States Navy during World War II, and a class of warship that is featured in Captain Ned Beach's best-selling novel, Run Silent, Run Deep. Around my neck are binoculars used by my stepfather, Joe Gould, in his submarine service in World War II, and in my hands are his Naval Academy class ring from the class of '43 and his dolphins from his 26-year naval career. I thought it poignant that these props should be shown to connect every emotion of what I hope you'll agree will be a phenomenal webinar. Back to the Vallejo, during World War II, Captain Beach served as an XO and CO of two boats in the class, Tarante and Piper, and his experiences in combat against Imperial Japan certainly would provide inspiration for the great book that he would write a decade later. He wrote this book while being military assistant to President Eisenhower. In our webinar this morning, you'll get first a technical briefing by retired Captain Jim Bryant on the submarines Ned Beach wrote about in Run Silent, Run Deep, and how they operated, and then Ingrid Beach will return to join with Dr. Dave Rosenberg to discuss the life and times of Captain Beach and discuss the writing of Run Silent and Run Deep. Dr. Rosenberg will stay on to participate in a roundtable discussion involving three great men who had distinguished careers with the submarine force in the Pacific: Admiral Tom Fargo, Vice Admiral Al Konechny, and Rear Admiral John Paget. Of course, we look forward to fielding your questions during this segment of the program. Your questions and their reflections are really the heart and soul of this webinar. Captain Bryant, over to you. I'll be back to moderate the discussion in a while, but in the meantime, enjoy.
My name is Jim Bryant, and I'm going to give you a quick technical brief of the ships and technology involved in the book to make you better understand it. This is a list of the ships in the book. Walrus is obviously a Gato-class submarine. Eel is obviously a Balo-class submarine. And this is Bungo Pete's Akakazi. Akakazi is about 325 tons, smaller than the fleet boat it's attacking. Here are the four guns. It was used in salvo to attack Walrus and Eel. And here's the well deck described in the book. This is what USS S-16 would have looked like. This submarine is fitted out for war patrols, but approximately minus the machine guns and radar. Layout of the USS S-16, you've got two diesels, two motor generators, two batteries. Here's the close-up of the S-16. You have the conning tower up here where the main character almost drowned. Hatch leading to the bridge, another hatch leading to the control room. This class submarine was fought from the control room. That's where the periscopes were. The main ballast tanks were not open to the sea. They had valves in the bottom called Kingston valves, and they had to be open when the submarine surfaced or dived. When the submarine surfaced, you gave a shot of air, then you shut the Kingston valves and you used a low pressure pump to pump the water out of the ballast tanks. The direct drive diesel, with both clutches shut, you ran the propulsion on the surface with the diesel engine. With this clutch open, you ran the electric motor off the batteries, submerged on the surface, and with this clutch open, you could run you could charge the batteries with the generator part of this motor generator. This is what Walrus and Eel would have looked like before the silhouette change when they arrived at Pearl Harbor. Look at all this superstructure up here that made these guys really good torpedo boats and not very good underwater propulsion. Here's a minimized silhouette of walrus and eel. A lot of it cut away because the Japanese lookouts were very sharp. Here's the bridge with a hatch going down to the conning tower, and another hatch going down to the control room. This submarine, walrus and eel, were fought from the conning tower. That's where the periscopes were, the fire control were. Talks about the cigarette deck. Here's the main induction, big U valve that had to be opened, but the submarine had to be far enough above the water before they opened that valve to run the diesel. Okay, the fleet-class boats in World War II all looked about the same. They had this same terrible submerged speed of maximum of 9 knots. That was only good for 1 hour. So they were very poor under the water. They couldn't get away. They couldn't attack very well. Surface, they were great, 20 knots. The Walrus was a thin-skinned Gato class, 300 feet, but they routinely went deeper, down to 375. And the Eel was a thick-skinned Balo class, much deeper diving submarine. Both these submarines had 2 large batteries, and they had 4 diesel generator sets. And these were really good machines because they were built in conjunction with the railroad train industry in the United States, because these were replacing steam locomotives for the railroad system. So the generators would charge the batteries, or they could run directly the electric motors that ran the screws through reduction gears or through direct drive. Sonar is talked about in the book. You've got 2 basic sonar systems. This is a passive one, topside, manually rotated. There were 2 of these. They were called sound heads. You read that in the book. They were lowered out from the bottom of the torpedo room, and they were active in passive sonars, but in the book only talks about passive. One of these tracked that Japanese submarine coming out that was Bungo Pete's friend and sank him. Radar is very important, obviously, from the book. This is your surface search radar. The submarine could submerge to a radar depth of about here and still use the radar. It also had an air search radar, not talked about in the book. These are the tanks in the book. Bow buoyancy was a ballast tank open to the ocean in the bottom. They put a bubble in to show the bow so the Bungo Pete would think his submarine was still around and not kaput on the bottom. Here's the negative tank, downward express. It was filled when on the surface, so it made the submarine dive faster, and as soon as it got below, they blow it, so to make the submarine neutrally buoyant. The safety tank is about the same capacity as the conning tower, so if the conning tower were to flood, as almost did in the S-16, you'll blow the safety tank and you get a neutral buoyancy. Main ballast tank's open to sea, and you put a shot of air in and then use the turbo blowers to fully service the submarine. Night surface attack, that's what everybody wanted to do. These are German submarines, but it gives you the impression of what they were doing. Running around on the surface with a very low silhouette, very close to the ocean, wreaking havoc among the surface ships, trying to not be forced down by the destroyers. The 14 steam torpedo was 17 knots slower than electric fish, but it didn't leave a huge wake that led you right back to where the submarine was. The submarine fire control problem. Here's your target coming down a base course. Target is zigzagging back and forth across this base course. You use the is-was to determine the best course to take to get closest to this base course, and then you use the banjo when you're ready to shoot to calculate this gyro angle. When the torpedo starts up, it starts up on the course of the submarine. The gyro angle is input to change that course to intercept the target. Here's the banjo. So it was a long procedure on the S-16. When Bledsoe was completing his qualification, he had to take his final bearing. They had to calculate the gyro angle, and then they had to run in spindles into the torpedo from the outside of the torpedo tube and actually set that gyro angle. Here's a picture of the is-was, kind of position keeper. Bledsoe was reminded using this that his target had not zigged when he was on the S-16, and it's kind of a circular slide rule to calculate courses. The Walrus and Eel both had the Mark III data computer. The position keeper that shows you the relative positions of the target and the ship, and through that it calculated continuous gyro angle to the torpedo, so there was no delay in firing. If you get forced down, you have to go deep, and you have to go very deep. The shock wave, you understand that. Bubble pulse damage, only short range damage. Expanding and contraction of the gas bubble that pulses the water. A lot of major damage to walrus in their attack was shaken. The trim pump was knocked off his kilt, was probably by shaking the submarine with his bubble pulse. In the book, the click is the arrival of the shock wave, the wham is the arrival of the sound wave, and the water flow noise is the back and forth flow of water across the submarine from the bubble pulse. Here's a real quick diagram of a squib going off underwater. You show the bubble expanding, contracting. Here's the pressure and time. Shock wave, large blast, and then slower, but more methodic, and it can cling to the side of the submarine and really shake the hell out of it. Look at how close you have to be to damage a submarine. And if you're less than 100 feet away, you're not going to get much damage at all. And it's worse, you need to dive deep, because if you need to get below those depth charges, because the upward blast. Now, the walrus got forced to the surface because gas from the blast filled the ballast tanks, and also pushed the submarine upward. To evade sonar. The maximum depth of a Japanese World War II depth charge in 1945 was 480 feet. That means if walrus got a chance to detect that entry splash, accelerated and turned away, it's very likely it's going to be greater than 100 feet, so it's not going to be severely damaged. The eel could do that, and also if it gets to 600 feet, it's going to be 100 feet deeper, so it's impervious to depth charge damage. If they can get that deep and the water's deep enough. Also, that turn throws a big knuckle in the water, we call it. That we could fool that active sonar and then slow and conserve your battery. Now I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Dave Rosenberg, who's going to give you the life and career of Ned Beach.
Good morning. I'm Captain Dave Rosenberg, and delighted to welcome you to our second Saturday seminar on Captain Ned Beach and Run Silent, Run Deep. Captain Beach came from a Navy family. His father, Edward Latimer Beach Sr., was his inspiration for both his career and for, in many ways, his life, including as a writer. Ned Beach, Edward Latimer Beach Jr., was born in New York City on the 20th of April, 1918. His family followed his father around, and Ned was appointed to the United States Naval Academy in 1935 by Senator Hiram Johnson of California. Ned worked quite hard, but his brilliance shone through. He graduated second in the class of 1939 out of 576 midshipmen, but also was regimental commander. There was no brigade at that time. It was only a regiment of midshipmen in his first class year. Upon graduation in June 1939, Ned did what most of his classmates did. They joined as surface combatant. He went to the heavy cruiser Chester, which had been commissioned in 1930, and soon thereafter moved on to an old four-stack destroyer, the USS Lee, that was recommissioned to deal with the emerging national emergency. The Lee served on duty with the Neutrality Patrol in the Atlantic, and Ned, looking around for other challenges, volunteered in 1941 for submarine duty. He went to the submarine school at New London, beginning in September 1941, and followed an abbreviated course to bring him out to the fleet rapidly. He graduated at the top of his submarine school class in December. He was assigned to a brand new submarine, the USS Trigger, that had just been built at Mare Island Naval Shipyard, where his dad had previously commanded. He joined Trigger in early 1942 when the ship was commissioned in January, and then took her from Mare Island out to Pearl Harbor, and then on war patrol. Trigger's first duty was, in fact, to serve with the patrol lines that were developed to watch for the Japanese fleet at the Battle of Midway. The submarine then went on a series of war patrols between June of 1942 and December of 1944, when Ned left her. He did 10 war patrols on Trigger. The submarine sank, verified 16 Japanese ships, and received the Presidential Unit Citation for her 5th, 6th, and 7th patrols. Young Ned rose from lieutenant junior grade to lieutenant commander on Trigger. He served in a whole series of responsible positions: diving officer, engineer, navigator, approach officer for torpedo attacks, and ultimately executive officer. He received 2 Silver Stars for his duties on Trigger, a Bronze Star, and a Navy Commendation Ribbon for his service. When Ned moved on from Trigger, he went home on leave to Palo Alto. Here, Ingrid Beach will tell the story of how she met her dashing young lieutenant commander.
We met during World War II in 1943, when he was home on leave, a 3-week leave. And his mother and my mother got together, and Ned's mother wanted me to meet Ned, but my mother was not that enthusiastic, because she said, Ingrid is only 17. She's in high school. It doesn't matter, said Ned's mother. He's just going to have a couple of dates and then go back to war. And but those couple of dates expanded, and we were madly in love after 2 weeks. And we actually, I'm the one who proposed, I suppose, because after he announced that he loved me, I said, and I love you too. And then I thought for a second, and I said, well, I guess that means we're engaged. The poor man gulped and said, I guess so. And so it was. He went back to war for a year, and I went back to high school and finished the high school. When he came back, fortunately, he was going to a new submarine. And so he left the Trigger, which was later sunk by the enemy. And we proceeded to it was called New Construction. And we were in Portsmouth, New Hampshire for 6 wonderful months before Ned had to go back to sea again.
Ned returned to the fleet as the executive officer of a new submarine, USS Tarrante, that had just been commissioned and was about to undertake her first war patrol. Her skipper was Captain Commander George Street. Tarante's first war patrol took her far into homeland waters for the Japanese. Her first area of patrolling was off of Nagasaki, where she sank a couple of small ships. She then moved on into the Yellow Sea and off Korea, where she sank 2 additional ships, and then finally off the Chinese port of Jeju-do. In that, Tarrante actually went into the harbor, found 3 ships there, a 4,000-ton Maru and 2 escorts, and sank both of those. For that remarkable patrol, including the penetration of an enemy harbor in wartime, Tarrante was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation for her first patrol. George Street received the Medal of Honor. He was up one of only three submariners who received the award personally rather than posthumously. Ned then went on and left Toronto to take his first command. This was the new submarine Piper that had undertaken 2 previous war patrols. When Ned came aboard, Japan was on her last legs, and Piper got one of what was the most dangerous assignment possible at this last stage of the war, namely in July 1945, in which she was actually ordered into the Sea of Japan. She was part of a second wolf pack, the first having done this in June of 1945, the rather famous 9 submarines of Heidmann's Hellcats that had gone into the Sea of Japan to sink shipping and end the last of the Japanese supply routes to the mainland of Asia. Ned went in August of 1945, and very early August. But the problem is that she didn't really find any shipping. She sank 2 small fishing vessels, but the fact was that there really was nothing that she could do. She rescued 6 of their crew as POWs, but she was in there only for 2 weeks when the war ended. Ned brought Piper back to Pearl Harbor and ultimately back to New London, where he was then detached. Ned, like so many of his submarine brethren, had already built a remarkable record and was known in Washington. His first job in D.C. was as the naval aide to the head of the Bureau of Naval Personnel, Vice Admiral Louis Denfeld. Admiral Denfeld subsequently, in 1947, became Chief of Naval Operations, succeeding Chester Nimitz. Upon Denfeld's promotion, Commander Beach was then assigned to the Atomic Defense Division, or the Atomic Defense Section of the Atomic Energy Division, Op 36 of the Office of the CNO. This was the division that did not work on nuclear propulsion, but worked on nuclear weapons. And Ned gained an early education in these capabilities that would stand him well subsequently. Shortly thereafter, Ned received orders to take command of the USS Amberjack. Amberjack was one of the first Guppy II conversions, and she was streamlined. Guppy stood for Greater Underwater Propulsive Power. The Y was added to make it a good acronym. And Amberjack proved her worth, because what she ended up doing during the 2 years that Ned commanded her, or a year and a half that Ned commanded her, was in fact to startle adversaries that she was serving as a training ship for anti-submarine purposes in exercises, including passing on a picture to the admiral of his carrier, which was signed with regards from Ned Beach and Amberjack. In August 1949, Ned's previous service as a naval aide caught the attention of the brand new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Omar Bradley. He came back to Washington right at the time of the famous Admiral's Revolt. In the course of his duties, was interviewed by then Captain Arleigh Burke as a possible addition to his Organizational Research and Policy Division, Op 23, a connection that would also serve Ned well in the future, but then served working for General Bradley until 1951, when he was then assigned as the commissioning commanding officer of the new submarine USS Trigger. Trigger had been sponsored by Mrs. Roy Benson. His second, Roy Benson, then a captain, later Rear Admiral, was his Ned's second commander on Trigger. And these pictures show Trigger and also Captain Benson and Captain Beach with a painting of the ship. Ned stayed on Trigger and did quite well with her until 1953, at which time he was picked as the naval aide to the President of the United States. During this time, Ned also found the opportunity to begin writing his own books. He published in 1952 a remarkable book called Submarine, a book that is still in print and a book that is still worth reading as a personal history of the submarine force in World War II. In 1953, Ned was picked up by the President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had decided that he was going to reduce the rank of his naval aides from Rear Admiral, as well as his Air Force and Army aides, who were major generals, to 05. Ned became his naval aide and served with him for 4 years. He was in charge of the White House mess. He also was in charge of the yacht Williamsburg, which Eisenhower had vowed to get rid of. After Eisenhower did get rid of the Williamsburg, Ned became responsible for overseeing the president's evacuation in the event of a national emergency from Washington. Ned was also critical, as this picture shows, of convincing the president that his wife Mamie should sponsor the first nuclear-powered submarine, USS Nautilus, when she was launched in New London, Connecticut in 1954. Ned served until 1957 in the White House. He then went on to briefly take a deep draft command in preparation for surfacing in the Navy of the USS Salamone, an oiler that served for one deployment in the 6th Fleet. During Ned's time in the White House, he decided to complete a novel he'd been working on. This became Run Silent, Run Deep. Ingrid Beach will now tell you the story of his work on that book.
Well, Ned wrote Run Silent, Run Deep while he was a naval aide to President Eisenhower. So the question came up, how could he write a book when he's working for the president? For heaven's sakes. And so I explained that he came home after a long day's work for the president, ate dinner, read a children's story to our kids, and then went down to his basement office. He had portholes in this basement office, by the way, and there he wrote for 4 solid hours, never interrupting. I would call down, "Don't you want some coffee?" "No, thanks." So he continued writing Run Silent, Run Deep, and it was published in 1955 while he was still at the White House.
Ned was going to go back to sea, more than likely as a surface naval officer, when in fact he was selected for nuclear power training, went through Admiral Rickover's very, very demanding course, and as a captain took command of the United States Navy's only 2-reactor submarine, the USS Triton SSRN 586. Triton was designed as a radar picket submarine in order to protect carrier task forces from enemy attack, but which would be able to get away from air attacks and nuclear attacks by being able to submerge. Triton was a big boat. The question was, what would Triton do in 1960 when she was going to undertake her shakedown cruise. Ned's successor on the White House staff, Commander and then Captain Evan Pete Orand, a fighter pilot with the Navy Cross, a pioneer jet pilot, made a suggestion to Admiral Arleigh Burke, who had been looking for ways of using his nuclear submarines to show the United States Navy's capabilities and to prove American technological superiority, that we ought to send Triton around the world submerged. In February 1960, Triton undertook that voyage, following as best as possible the route of Ferdinand Magellan around the world, and ultimately completing that voyage in May of 1960. The picture in the upper right-hand corner is of Ned with King Neptune and his bride when they crossed the line in the Atlantic that spring. The bottom picture is of President Eisenhower giving his former naval aide the Legion of Merit. The kindly old gentleman to the left of the picture in a civilian suit is Rear Admiral Hyman G. Rickover. Ned went on to write the story of this in a book, Around the World Submerged. Ned then went on to command a submarine squadron, Submarine Squadron 8, for a year. With his deep draft command and his command of the Subron, he was now fully qualified for flag. Ned talks about being blackballed by an officer that he refused to identify, and I won't go into here on his promotion, but it's also reported that the choice was between Ned and Captain Dennis Wilkinson, the first skipper of Nautilus, and the board chose Wilkinson for flag. Ned went through the National War College, graduating in 1963, and then went on to serve at OPNAV in the Office of the Secretary of the Navy until he was able to then retire in 1966. Upon his retirement, he was immediately hired as the loose chair of naval science at the Naval War College as a civilian, and went up there where he began to resume much of his writing and research. He then spent 7 years on the staff of the Senate Republican Policy Committee. He was chief of staff to Senator Jeremiah Denton, Rear Admiral, U.S. Navy, retired, and the former longtime Vietnam POW, for a year, and then fully retired to write. Ned went on to continue to write a number of books. Wreck of the Memphis, his monumental United States Navy 200 Years, wrote the prose for this marvelous picture book, Keepers of the Sea, wrote his autobiography, and then subsequently also wrote 2 sequels to Run Silent, Run Deep. Dust on the Sea, on Rich Richardson's final World War II patrol, and then Rich Richardson's duties during the Cold War in the Arctic. Ned was very, very proud when the Naval Institute, with which he had long been associated, chose to name its new headquarters Beach Hall for Ned and his father. Captain Ned Beach passed away on December 1st, 2002, at the age of 84. He was a true naval hero. He was a great representative of the Navy and of the submarine service. And from my own personal experience, one of the most truly decent and giving individuals that one could ever meet. One of my fondest memories is a long talk at the original Naval Institute offices in January of 1996 about Arleigh Burke right after Admiral Burke's funeral. He was a remarkable man.
Thank you, Mrs. Beach, Captain Bryant, and Captain Rosenberg for your very informative, and in Ingrid Beach's case, personal background on a Navy hero who we will be remembered for the ages. Before we begin the panel discussion, I'd like to acknowledge and warmly thank our sponsor, General Dynamics and General Dynamics Electric Boat, for your steadfast support of our Navy and nation and to this program today. In our sponsor's own words, I read, General Dynamics and General Dynamics Electric Boat are proud to sponsor today's second Saturday webinar and discussion of Captain Ned Beach's seminal World War II submarine novel, Run Silent, Run Deep. As Secretary of Defense Esper discussed earlier this week, the submarine force is a top priority in the Navy's future fleet as the nation faces increasing global maritime threats. We can learn important lessons from the history of the submarine force as we look ahead to future submarine designs and missions. General Dynamics is proud to deliver the submarines that protect our sailors, our families, and our freedom. These words and sentiments, specifically about the important lessons of the forefathers of our submarine force, have brought together nearly 500 participants from all ages, warfare specialties, and walks of life. We are represented today in 33 states and 5 countries. We have submariners who served with Captain Beach in USS Triton and other commands. We are joined by 3 former Navy secretaries and personnel from pay grades 010 to junior enlisted. Our panelists today need no introduction. Their achievements on behalf of our Navy and submarine force are legendary. Because our remarks are predominantly focused on the Pacific, you might note that we're wearing aloha attire. It is now my pleasure to introduce Admiral Tom Fargo, Vice Admiral Al Konechny, and Rear Admiral John Paget as our principal panelists. Captain Dave Rosenberg, a national treasure, is also in the room, as it were, to provide context wherever this distinguished panel might need. Gentlemen, welcome.
Well, let me start, Sonny. I think, in fact, it didn't influence my submarine selection. It really came into my life after I joined the submarine force. My father was a naval aviator. I went to the Naval Academy expecting that I would fly, and of course, it turned out a lot different than that. But so I read Run Silent, Run Deep in sub school, and what it meant to me was that. I was joining an organization that had a fabulous history, and it was about the people. Al Konechny uses the word "you're joining a tribe," and it very much was that way. A set of people that were tremendously dedicated to their nation and to their Navy, and their life. The difficulties operating at sea, the challenges of coming up against the enemy were something that really brought home to me how important it was to be a submariner.
Others, do you have any comments on the same question, Vice Admiral Konechny or Admiral Paget?
I'm kind of glad you asked me, Sonny, because I wasn't sure whether it was my turn or not. But listen, I agree 100% with Tom. I have to laugh how it all works. I remember for myself, just being able to get through the Naval Academy was kind of a miracle. And I probably would have been a garbage man. It didn't make a damn bit of difference. I have to admit, I was able, one of the summer cruises, to spend a couple of days on the old Redfish from San Diego to San Francisco. I was most impressed. The fact of the matter is, for myself, it was a unbelievable awakening. I was one of those guys in 1966 that I wanted to be an aviator. And that's only because a guy named John McCain, as a lieutenant, had trained us for the week we had in Pensacola in 1964. And I was always amazed that he had a lot of good-looking little ladies around him. And I said, I think that's what I want to do. The fact of the matter is, I think we all start to see the hangman's noose as he gets close to realism. And I said, you know, that high-speed relative motion is not my bag. And thank God they needed bubbleheads, I guess, in 1966, because 2 weeks before graduation, I went down to see Admiral over and his team, and thank God I was selected. But I must tell you, with that all said, it's like Tom says, I got on board that first ship, and I was just most impressed. I instantly saw camaraderie. I instantly thought, gee, I don't know if I can match up to these guys. I instantly saw sailors that truly appreciated good leadership and also knew that they should train that leadership. And I'm talking about the young officers. I still think of guys like my first skipper, Jack Nunley. I look at Arnie Johnson after that saying, hey, you'd be a great guy to go back to the Naval Academy. Here, Johnson was an RPI graduate. He cared, he cared, he cared. If I go to my great reward, which may not be that great, even in a couple of years, whatever it might be, the one thing I'll never, ever forget in my life is it's the submarine force, and it goes way, way back to our beginnings, that invented the word mentoring. It's the submarine force that invented the word camaraderie. And I've often thought that that installation of those words that say, you know, the youngest young man, now it's men and women, but in those days, man, is as important on that ship and its safety and its survival as the senior man, the skipper. And that will never, ever leave me. It's a part of my life. So that's my story.
Admiral Paget.
My father was a career submarine officer who'd made war patrols during the Second World War. So Run Silent, Run Deep was actually part of my required reading when I was in the 8th grade. And then when I was a sophomore in high school, we moved to New London, Connecticut, and all the buildings on the base were named after these heroes. So we're sort of embedded with this this culture of hard work and heroism, which was embedded in the submarine force. So it wasn't much of a stretch for me to say that I really wanted to go do that myself. Most of the men I admired as a young man growing up were naval officers, and most of those naval officers were wearing dolphins. So as I say, the novel Run Silent, Run Deep captures both the high standards and the hard work that are associated with being on submarines. And as Admiral Konechny said, the camaraderie and the mentorship that goes on. I recall I went to my first submarine clam bake at North Lake on the sub base back in 1962, and it was an opportunity for me to meet all these guys that had made war patrols and just listen to them tell their stories. And it was fabulous for me. And so it was a very natural thing as I left the Naval Academy to want to go back out and join that group of my heroes and my role models.
A lot of them. We've got good time for this. Did you, I guess the audience wants to know, and I do too, did you have a personal experience that you could share with Captain Beach or really other heroes of the era? Dr. Rosenberg mentioned the four commanders who received a living award of the Medal of Honor: George Steele, Gene Fluke, Dick O'Kane, and Lawson Ramage. And then other heroes kind of come to mind: Slade Cutter, Creed Burlingame, Norm Nash, Jess Worley, John Paget Sr., Dick O'Kane, Hal Williams. Did you ever any interactions with them? And what were your recollections on that you'd like to share?
Well, I'll take it on first if I could. I'll try to. I never make a long story short, Sonny. That's my problem. And I had to be one. You know, I met Beach a few times in my life, and you know, all my years living in Annapolis and actually being stationed there allowed me to meet so many of these heroes. But the first thing I would like to mention, we talk about Roy Benson. In the mid 80s to the late 80s, I was like the deputy commandant there, and I used to run into Admiral Benson just about every Sunday. We had a thing where we were really fortunate enough at the Naval Academy to have some great contributors to the arts. The problem was the art show, and it was generally music or singing or whatever it might be, was on a Sunday. The midshipmen had very little interest in going to that sort of thing. So as the deputy commandant, I would make all the folks who were restricted go. At least we'd have an audience. And more often than not, I'd meet Admiral Benson. He was a charming guy, and I had known a few of the other guys because I was stationed in Annapolis. And he told me the story one Sunday afternoon before this all started. Again, it was a little concert about his beginnings at Development Squadron 2. And I was most impressed. He was the first skipper up there. And the more I read into it, I just realized that this was the guy who probably had a great input on us basically winning that Cold War under the sea because of passive ranging, target motion analysis, and all that stuff. It was pretty super. Well, I also had the time during that time to really get to know Gene Fluckey. I still laugh to my tail when Gene was put in the columbarium in the Naval Academy. I was the honor platoon commander, and I still think he's got to be rolling over in his grave because when I kneeled down to give Margaret, who had been his second wife, to give her the flag, I couldn't get my fat rear end up, and I remember saying, "Hey boys, help me get." And I laugh to this day because even his bride laughed. The final thing I want to tell you, this is a little touchy, but it's about Ned Beach and about how these guys work. You know, it's like on Navy today. The good news is it's a composite makeup of great diversity, great personalities, great different ways of doing business. The good news is for me, at least in my case, and I think in all of our cases, they allow you to be who you are. So the year is the summer, I guess it's September of 1990. And I'm working in D.C. in the Pentagon. I'm a Navy captain. I have no idea what the hell's going to go on with my future. And I get a call from the sub-vets of World War II. I had known the national commander because he came from their Delmarva chapter. He says, "Hey, Al, we got a problem." I said, "What's the problem, sir?" He says, "We want you to be the speaker at our national convention." This is 1990 in Kissimmee, Florida. I said, "What the hell do you want me to go down there for?" And I said, "I'm nothing. I'm just a regular Navy captain working with the Pentagon." I said, "We got a flap going on. The boys who made patrols out of Australia, they don't get along sometimes with the boys who made the patrols out of Pearl." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" He said, "Well, the Pearl guys want beach, and the Australian guys don't want beach." And we felt, and this is an old guy, he's gone to his great reward. He said, "We felt that you, being a young guy, could talk to these old guys," and it's all the sailors, and you know, these guys are the greatest guys in the world, and all the officers that would go to those things. And he said, "And you wouldn't be controversial." So a little bit afterwards, I did meet Ned Beach, so I told him that story, and I'll tell you, he laughed his tail off. But it was a great opportunity for me, and it just shows how we all have our own ways. It's just like today, the East Coast guys to the West Coast guys sometimes. So those are my stories, and I'm going to stick to them. Thanks.
Yeah, you know, I guess it's not one hero. It's there are just so many of them. You know, I can remember as a Pacific Fleet commander, whenever I had a distinguished visitor in town, I took him down to Lockwood Hall, took him to the clean sweep bar, took him into the skipper's lounge, and you'd look on the right side of the skipper's lounge, and there were the pictures of the Medal of Honor winners. And then on the other wall, I mean, this huge wall, were all the folks that had won Navy Crosses and Silver Stars. And you mentioned a lot of those names. And of course, we grew up with some, and John and I grew up with Jess Worley, for example. But you know, that the history that Ned Beach describes in Run Silent, Run Deep, when you coming into Pearl Harbor, you know, after December 7th, and going past Hospital Point, going past the 1010 Pier, the shipyard, Ford Island, you know, pulling into the submarine piers, the dive tower, and then even the Royal Hawaiian here, and it looks exactly the same, by the way. But you got a feel for the culture and really the heroism of all these folks. And it was an organization that worked hard and played hard, and you can picture it vividly after reading the book. And I have the great good fortune of seeing it on a regular basis right here.
In my case, actually, at that first clam bake, I met Admiral Ramage, who was the deputy subland at the time. I'd never met someone who'd earned a Congressional Medal of Honor, and I must confess that made a substantial impression on me. And while I was stationed at the Naval Academy as the Commandant of Midshipmen, on service selection night, or service selection day, we had Admiral Flucky. Admiral Flucky would come over to the commandant's quarters and sign copies of his book for all the midshipmen who had selected submarines as their service selection. So I have several pictures of Admiral Flucky with his Medal of Honor ribbon around his neck, and signing books for the midshipmen, all personally endorsed to them. And that was quite a thrill. And then to build on what Admiral Fargo was discussing, O'Kane was out in Hawaii while I was sub-pack. And he and Dick O'Kane and I walked through the clean sweep and into the skipper's lounge, and took a look at all those pictures on the wall. And just listening to him reflect upon that was really a thrill for me. So I feel very fortunate to have touched each of those three heroes. And then, as Admiral Fargo said, so many others in my life have been heroes to me. So like I say, I've been very fortunate and quite blessed.
Captain Richardson's conundrum with pushing a command qualification on his exec, Lieutenant Jim Bledsoe. The environment of the qual board seemed permissive and forgiving, and even the submarine commander was pushing for this, but not so for Captain Richardson. His refusal to qualify Lieutenant Bledsoe, whom he deemed unready, capable but unready, created a natural tension throughout the rest of the book. How did the leadership described in Run Silent, Run Deep, with vignettes like this or others, influence you specifically in how you developed your own leadership style, from your department head tours to your XO ride to command?
Well, I think, you know, the vignette was brings back a lot of memories. I can remember actually my qualification in submarines. I was on loan to Queenfish and Fred McLaren, and we were out in the Western Pacific, and we thought we'd just about finished our qualification, and he said, Fargo, take the con. And that's when I first learned about kind of the crucible, about how much pressure could be put on you at a point in time to see how you would perform. And of course, during the next hour, the ship fell apart in just about every way known to man. And I think that's a big part of the submarine forces, is how you perform under pressure. And certainly that vignette talked about how an officer responds to those types of situations and what you learn about them during that particular period of time. So it did bring back a lot of memories. It also brought back probably the most important lesson I learned. I think your legacy in the submarine force is really the people that you have trained that go on to command themselves. And the thing that you're most proud of are those folks that may have been department heads, may have been junior officers that you served with and you had a chance to influence, and they went on to take command in the submarine force that you value so much.
Yeah, I certainly, wholeheartedly agree with Tom. I honestly truly enjoyed that conundrum that existed, because we've all been through that questioning. Do we qualify? Do we certify? Do we push this young officer up? Or is it the time to say, we got to cut our loss here, we shouldn't? And I think, quite frankly, it's probably in my mind, it's probably the most important thing that we do and have to do in command. And there are two sides of that story that I've seen through my life and continue to see even now. I think Tom is 100% right that we really are judged by what we left. What do we do for the future of this organization, particularly in a leadership role, but across the board, the sailors as well? Did we allow the Navy to grow downstream? Or, quite frankly, and I've seen officers in the past do this, they're long gone. Thank God those times are gone, that in many cases treated an individual like a spare part. If it doesn't work out, we'll just go ahead and turn it in and the hell with him or her, or whatever it might be. So I think it's a very, very critical piece of being in command. And I think the Captain Beach portrayed it beautifully. It's a tough problem. The other side of this is, and it keeps coming back to me, and it has very little to do with the book, but it bugs me. Every time I've ever heard a flap, whether it be a collision at sea, or whether it be untoward behavior, or whether it be harassment, generally somebody will come out of the closet and say, I knew that. I only tell that story because, quite frankly, I think it goes with the first part of making that right decision. And it has always forced me to say, I don't think, even now, I don't know why I'm still working, but even now, I'm not going to allow this person to get promoted to do something because there are too many other people, and in my case, Navy vessels that are relying on. So I love Tom's comment. It's the toughest thing we do, I think, in command.
Well, I agree with both of the former speakers. I think it's a responsibility that you have, whether you're the senior watch officer, whether you're the executive officer or the commanding officer. It's your responsibility to make sure that everybody understands what the standard is, and that everybody understands that if they don't meet the standard, they won't be successful in the submarine force. I take great pride in the fact that there was great success from the young officers with whom I served, both as XO and CO, and in fact even as department head, who did very, very well in command. Several of them went on to become flag officers in the submarine force, and I take great satisfaction in that myself, that their success, because I know at least I had a part of an influence on them understanding what the standard is. And I think that one of the aspects of submarining that is most important is that we evaluate ourselves as above average or whatever, but the average keeps getting better and better. And so instead of getting letter grades A, B, C, or D, we say, okay, when everybody's above average, all of a sudden average goes up. And therefore the standards of performance and the expectation of performance continues to improve. I look at the standards that we have met today on the submarine force and compare them what they were when I was a junior officer on my first ship, and they're substantially improved. And I think that the force operates better because of that.
Dr. Rosenberg, I've got actually two. Tom Cutler, who's a dear friend of the foundation and an institution himself at the Navy Institute, asks what Ned Beach thought of the movie. And I think we spoke before that the alignment between the Cane Mutiny, which was our topic last month, and the book and movie was very close. This was not the case in this movie. So if you could speak to what anecdotally you heard from Ingrid and what you knew from your own experience. And then there's another question from Hal Friedman, who wants a little bit more information on the conjecture behind why someone with the credentials, the esteem, the tough jobs, the legacy, class standing when he graduated from school, you know, this just legacy of excellence and doing risky and hard things, why he did not make flag. So over to you, sir, for that question.
I'd like to make a comment about World War II submariners, since I have had a good bit of experience with a number of them, and I'll be brief on that. Very briefly on Ned, in answer to Tom Cutler, Ned essentially he had very little to do with the movie, essentially nothing, and didn't like it. I mean, as a number of people have noted, the movie has literally, other than the names of the characters, no relationship to the book at all. In fact, Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster. Lancaster is the only guy of the right age. Gable was much too old, and the whole story just doesn't make an awful lot of sense in a whole bunch of ways. So the movie did not follow the novel. It was just a means by which Hollywood could turn out another submarine movie at the time. In answer to Hal Friedman's question, there's not a lot of good answers to this. Ned, in his book Salt and Steel, talks about the fact that when he wrote Run Silent, Run Deep, he talked about a former squadron commander and a member of the subpack staff who has yet to be named, and you can dig around, and I have my own theory, but I'm not going to go into it, who was annoyed and visited him at the White House because Joe Blunt did not come off well in Run Silent, Run Deep. Now, whether Blunt was still on active duty to influence the selection board, it's possible he may well have done so based on some letters that are quoted in a biography that was done of Ned on an early selection board. The other thought that has also been ventured is that Ned, when he was skipper of Trigger 2, this was part of the second generation of boats, the first post-war generation with engines that gave real problems. The line in New London was harder, darter, Trigger and Trout, always in and never out, was the fact that these boats had real serious problems. Well, Ned, not being a shrinking violet, raised holy hell with Electric Boat and with the submarine force about this. And allegedly memories ran deep on that. And that's possibly one of the reasons why he was not selected. Another theory is he spent too much time in Washington, way too much time as naval aide to the president. But that doesn't seem to quite work. It really is baffling because of the fact that his record was so strong and his experience at the highest levels of the Navy and government would have made it possible. Final thought was just this. I've been pretty lucky in the course of both my Navy career and even before that to get to know a number of World War II submariners. In the late 70s, I helped restore and preserve the submarine Silversides in Chicago. And during that time, one of the things I was able to do, giving a talk down in the Citadel, to spend a long evening imbibing really good scotch with Creed Burlingame down in Charleston, South Carolina. And let me tell you that much of the image of Creed Burlingame, including with the beard, even though he was fully clean-shaven at the time when I met him, was fully justified in terms of understanding him. The other one was that we had the skippers of Silversides come up to Chicago along with the crew for a reunion weekend sometime in the late 70s. And so I got to see Burlingame again, but also John Coy and also John Nichols. And one of the things that did strike me was the fact that there is no standard submarine skipper. These were three totally different personalities in terms of looking at them. Burlingame was certainly a much more wild guy. Coy was a much more, shall we say, steady character. And John Nichols, fascinatingly, was the only member of the squaless crew of the wardroom who actually went on to command a submarine in World War II. And so you're talking about multiple Navy Cross winners in both the case of Burlingame and Coy and the case of Nichols, three totally different personalities. And then finally, I was very fortunate to meet Dick O'Kane for a long evening when he came to talk to the folks at Silversides. And what is very, very clear from that is that the madman that one could detect from a number of the stories was still there. This was a guy who was really a remarkably brave and very, very aggressive individual in multiple ways. And then finally, I got to know very well Mike Rinskoff, who rode drum, who was on drum, member of class of 38, and finally commanded our Navy Cross recipient, who I was able to get to talk about the role of Ultra in the initial efforts we did on the history of operational intelligence. Mike was, again, a totally different guy. And so you can also note that if you look at our three panelists, who I've gotten to know pretty well over the years, the fact is these are three totally different personalities. But the fact is what they've been talking about, the camaraderie, the critical importance of mentorship, of leadership, of bringing your JOs along, of training them, that has all been there. And that has been utterly critical to the history of the submarine force. And you could also see it in Ned in the discussions I had with him.
Dr. Dave, Admirals, anybody want to pile on to those answers? Okay, the next question is by Bob Cullen, and it's really an interesting question completely, because we all know that the journeys and deployments and challenges of going to sea are fraught with CAS reps and things like that. And so in that spirit, the question is, did USS Triton's record-setting circumnavigation go smoothly? Were there any major problems en route? And when the day was done, what was the final grade on that? What we view as a magnificent event, but were there things that were inside baseball that we might not have appreciated about the unique challenges of that operation?
Well, I only have secondhand information about that. I've talked to a couple of the officers who were junior officers on board that ship for that trip. And they had the standard deficiencies noted log, I guess. But it really proved the sustained endurance of the ship, of a submarine. There was a great Bob Newhart routine that was out at about the same time they were finishing up, where Newhart was being interviewed or he was on the 1MC talking to the crew, and he said, well, men, we're about ready to surface the ship and enter either New York City or Buenos Aires. We're not sure. And I think that level of humor is one of the things that carried him through. They certainly had challenges and problems, but at least from the accounts that I heard, the ship performed remarkably well, and certainly verified the fact that submarines can go anywhere and be anywhere and sustain it.
Sonny, one thing that it's always been of great interest to me is how you get a submarine underway, right? And there's a limited period of time to get it underway because you're in an upkeep, a maintenance availability, and you can't get underway until everything is fixed. And especially with older submarines, like anybody that spent any time on a 594, so you get a window where everything's fixed and you get underway, and then things start to break, right? I mean, it seems like the first 2 weeks you're underway, the messenger of the watch is walking in every 15 minutes and saying the evaporator is out of commission. But once you're underway, you just fix it. I mean, sailors figure out how to fix it and keep you running. And then about 2 weeks into the trip, since everything is running now and it runs pretty smoothly. I mean, things stay up and yeah, as I said, you fix the little things that occur. But it is a phenomenal accomplishment to spend that much time at sea, and it's I do think it's a tribute to the ingenuity of the American sailor that they will fix anything that goes wrong. They'll make the part if they don't have it on board. They'll jury rig it if they have to, and don't tell Admiral Rickover I said that. But they'll make sure that that ship stays underway. So, what an accomplishment!
Hey, Sonny, I would just add quickly. I certainly agree with the comments that have been made by my dear friends. But obviously that was a time where the great rivalry between the Soviet Union and the rest of the world was on, and this was a very important mission. Number two, though, and I just repeat from what other folks have said, we had a great capability then, and it came from the heritage that started well before World War II, but certainly during the war, to make do with what we had. And we had young people who were not only operators, but truly maintainers. And I like Tom Fargo's comment before. You're right, Admiral Rickover might turn over a little bit, but they could keep that ship at sea. And we've seen that through all of our careers. I am a bit concerned today that a couple of years ago, particularly at our surface Navy side, that we walked a little bit away from operator maintainers, and we see results of that daily. And I always say to myself, gosh, if we could take the lesson learned from those decades of operator maintainers, providers, and bring that back today, I think we probably have a stronger Navy. The key to success then was the people, just like it is today.
There's a lot of questions about Ned Beach not making flag, and as the moderator, I just insert my own opinion about that. Making flag is a great, nice thing, but there are some phenomenal mentors, and there are in any 06. I mean, if you've made 06 and you've had major command, that's a success. And I think I go to a person who's sort of a personal hero of mine and classmate of my stepfather's, Reuben Woodall. Reuben Woodall commissioned the Robert E. Lee, and in his wardroom he had J. Guy Reynolds, Chuck Griffiths, Bud Cotterer, and 3 or 4 other folks who they may not necessarily have made flag, but they solidly contributed in the submarine force through major command. And it's leaders like that we look up to. And I had the honor of attending a few retirement ceremonies for 2 and 3 and 4 stars that they recognized the most influential person in their career was Reuben Woodall. And I just any thoughts just to kind of put a coda on the Ned Beach not making flag.
Well, I think that the question you have to ask is the criteria for making flag is a very sensitive criteria, and basically you're going to pick 25 officers out of a group of about 750 on any particular flag selection board. Of the 750 that are evaluated, certainly 250 are absolutely qualified to make flag, and the board's responsibility is to pick 25. So just by doing the math, you can say that the real question you have to ask is, was there anyone selected who was not worthy? And by that estimate, it seems to me we do a pretty good job of picking worthy officers. I would also say is my father didn't make flag. He was a pretty good naval officer. Most of the naval officers that I've met in my life didn't make flag, and they were really good naval officers. Vice Admiral Cooper, when he was at Oppo 2, pointed out to me that the Navy gives you the opportunity to be disappointed no matter when you retire that you didn't get the next bump up. So, you can say, golly, I had a terrible career because I didn't get a 3rd star. And look at there's Fargo and Konechny got more. I don't think that's the right criteria. I think you have to measure what it is that you contributed. And again, as Admiral Fargo mentioned earlier, you go back and look at your legacy. And the fact is that lots of the junior officers with whom I served went on to become very, very fine senior naval officers.
No, I think John's captured it properly. I mean, having sat on a number of those boards, the number of fabulous naval officers that you weren't able to promote, and you could tick them off. We all have met literally hundreds of them. So John provided a really good summary.
Yeah, first of all, I'm really glad, Sonny, that you mentioned Reuben Woodall, because I had the opportunity a couple of times to meet with him, and at a time when the Cold War was raging, when a time when, quite frankly, we're building submarines, 12 a year and that sort of thing, I always looked at him as one of the good guys. But it brings me back to the comments that John and Tom had made, that there's no new rules. God bless it. Sadly, we all go away a little discouraged, I guess, but at the end of the day, there's so many people who are qualified. I feel very fortunate in the submarine force, because I can't speak for other forces, but one of the most wonderful things about being a bubblehead has been that we have a lot of latitude in this relatively small community. And I used to enjoy going to even some of these Naval Submarine League meetings in the old days and watch the battles back and forth. Even in my time, I used to like the battles between the East Coast and the West Coast. But when we got done, we all come together. With that all said, I do think there's something perhaps to be said about, you got to kind of, if you want to keep moving, stay in your lane. And I will tell you, for me personally, over my entire career, I have said, or been told 3 or 4 times, get back in your lane a little bit there, buddy. You're pushing it too far. And I only mention that because I have a feeling, and what a wonderful guy. But if you take Ned Beach, I'll probably get myself in trouble here, certainly with Ingrid and everyone else. There probably were some in the Navy who said, nah, if you're a damn naval officer, you go to sea, god darn. You don't write a book. That's a terrible way of looking at things, but I'm telling you, that it all has to do with being in the lane. The most hurtful thing ever said to me, ever in my life, that's a lie, but it was hurtful, was when I made flag and somebody said, you're probably the first guy who made flag giving free beer away to the sailors. I remember saying, listen, you creep. I took the same damn exams as you did. Give me a break. But that's a philosophical answer to a very good question, and it holds no water, Sonny, but there it is.
Reuben's son, Steve, is a very close and old friend of mine. And I got this story both from Steve and also in a memorable dinner out in Annapolis with Reuben Woodall, Kinnard McKee, and Mike Rinskoff. I did ask Reuben whether this story was true. And this is a lesson. perhaps one that doesn't normally happen. But the one thing that one shouldn't do is what is thought of as what was really the key that kept Reuben Woodall from making flag. When he commanded the submarine squadron in Holy Loch, the SSBNs, Admiral Rickover came over for an inspection. They were driving around in the hills of Scotland at the time. Rickover made one of his rather testy comments. And the report is, confirmed by Reuben, that Captain Woodall asked Admiral Rickover to step out of the car, and he left him on the side of the road. Perhaps that is not something that one should, in fact, do in any quest for flag, but that was the kind of guy that Reuben Woodall definitely was.
So Admiral Fargo has a hard stop, and rather than me telling carpool stories about Admiral Konechny with Phil Quast, Tom Cruiser, and Pete Roberts back in the day when we were all in the bureau together, I'm gonna just ask you to share your final reflections. And for you, Admiral Fargo, you go first, and then you may leave the room, sir, and then we'll proceed from there.
Thanks, Sonny, and this is a great event, and really enjoyed participating. You know, one of the things that, as I reread Run Silent, Run Deep, I thought about, you know, what we had learned from it in terms of going to command and being a submariner, and I'd kind of summarize them all by saying that, you know, first of all, know and study your enemy. I mean, they clearly understood that piece. This building a team piece, and not only building a team and training them, but being aware of how they're doing day in and day out, whether they're on the ship or off the ship, and whether they're having a good day or a bad day, and being able to influence how they perform. This camaraderie piece came up again in the wardroom. I mean, frankly, that's why we all stuck around. That's why we stayed in the Navy, stayed in the submarine force. It's hugely important. Knowing your environment, which certainly the good commander used it to great advantage. Being quiet, your life depends on it. And the last piece is being proud to be in the Navy, being proud to be a submariner. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for inviting me to join this. Not a chance. Thanks, Evan.
Well, I guess I would say that the book was sort of captured one of the things that Admiral McKee told us when I was at Prospective Commanding Officer School. He said to be a successful commanding officer, you have to have three things. You have to have competence, you have to have integrity, and you have to have stamina. And I think that's very much reflected in Run Silent, Run Deep. You got to be good at your job. You got to train your people. You got to support your people. As Admiral Fargo said, you have to know how your people are doing. You have to understand what they need to get to their best effort. And that's all part of your professional competence. Integrity, I got to tell you, in the submarine force, one of the things that has always been very important to me was that if a submarine officer told you something, it had to be true. And you had to have the integrity to stand up, and even when you're going to have to take a licking, stand up and tell the truth and do the right thing. And the stamina part is really the hardest thing, because I'm not talking physical stamina, but you got to keep doing the right thing and demanding the right thing until the right thing gets done. And I guess if there is a shortfall, that I find that whenever you see there's a problem, somebody just said it's too hard to keep working this hard. And I think in the submarine force, we've always found that you still have to work hard all the time, and that the reward comes in a job that's well done, and the celebration that occurs after the job is well done helps reinstill and reinvigorate the camaraderie. It's an absolute essential element in the submarine force. be it the wardroom, the crew, the squadron, whatever it is. So those three things I thought that Admiral McKee told us: competence, integrity, and stamina. That really is a key ingredient to success.
Thank you, sir. Admiral Konechny.
Yeah. Hey, finally, Sonny, thanks also for having us. And David, it's good to see you again, my friends. Together. I really appreciated the opportunity to be here today. And when I reflect back on Run Silent, Run Deep, and I reflect back on a relatively long career as a submariner, the thoughts keep coming up to me that, yes, you've got to be on top of your game. You've got to build a team, and you've got to make sure that that team continues to build upon itself. And then perhaps that you have a responsibility to make sure that you're leaving something for that Navy downstream. But if I may, what continually comes back to me, because I'm just so proud of the ability to have been in that force, is that we learned somewhere, not me, but we learned well before, even of us here, decades before, about the need for that great camaraderie. The realization that everybody has a mom and everybody has a dream. That need to take God's least chosen child and build him up and make him as best we can be. These are lessons that I sure wish we could teach today out in the streets sometimes, and things like that, that the closeness, the need. I see it in the commercial workplace today where I am. I have many project managers that don't understand it the way all of us so many decades ago were taught, that you will take care of your people. And oh, by the way, you will train them to make sure we get this sewer pipe back home. When you read that book again and again, all of those emotions go through you. And when you talk about these heroes, hey, great diversity. I like Dave's comments before. They were all different, but put together, they did pretty good. And oh, by the way, they beat the enemy in different ways too. That's what we're going for. So, Dave, wonderful to see you, Sonny, and everybody else, John and Tom. Been a great day. Had a little
thank you.
Here, but I'm okay.
Thank you, sir. Today we had nearly 500 viewers. And not all of you are members of our foundation, and I'd like to request that you proceed directly to our website, navyhistory.org, and join our foundation. I think you'll find it to be the best $50 you've spent in a long time. Our content is rich and deep, evidence-based, but with Navy heritage and interesting programs like this event. Our next event on Saturday, the 14th of November, features Theodore Roosevelt's classic and definitive work, The Naval War of 1812. This will be another shouldn't miss production. But back to our foundation membership. In 4 second Saturday events, we've had over 2,500 viewers, either live or through our YouTube posts. So check us out, please. Today, our foundation members fondly remember the life of our 23rd Chief of Naval Operations, Carlisle A.H. Trost, from the class of '53. We're saddened by his passing and wish his family God's blessings as they mourn his profound loss with us. We thank Tim Oliver from the great class of '69, a classmate of John Paget's, and the Navy Submarine League for their participation in advertising of this webinar. I hope to work together again soon. We've got some plans on Thresher that I think you'll be enamored with. Thank you, Tim. Mostly, we thank you, our viewers, for your interest in our beloved Navy. Catch you next month. It's not too early to download and reread TR's The Naval War of 1812. I got it for 99 cents on Kindle. Someone also asked earlier, how do we get Captain Beach's books? And you can go on Amazon and get them, but I'm a life member of the Naval Institute, and I think you just go right there and you'll get them all. So aloha and mahalo, Alpha Delta TAC 28, and stay around for just about 15 more seconds for one more surprise.